What camera should you buy for $500? I'm going to make some initial statements on what camera to buy for $500, and then I'm going to go more in depth with testing the two cameras that I have and also comparing them to the iPhone and GoPro. So before I even go into detail with the test that I did, let's go over some basics right out the gate. If you only have $500 and not a penny more, you should probably opt for the Panasonic Lumix FZ300. If you have $500 now and are willing to spend anywhere between $250 and $500 more in the future, I'd recommend the Canon M50. If you specifically want to make use of telephoto lens or even wide-angle lens at a budget of around $500, I would recommend the Lumix FZ300. If you want to make an emphasis on portraits or night shooting with a wide open aperture, I'd recommend the Canon M50. If you need a reliable 4K footage that you can shoot on automatic mode, I would recommend the Lumix FZ300. If you want a clear image, high quality 1080p video with a cinematic 4K option, if you are using tripod, then I would recommend the Canon M50. If you specifically want to vlog for $500, I would recommend the latest GoPro. And finally, before considering any of these cameras, I would recommend upgrading your phone and making sure that you can use your phone as an alternate camera as you save going towards the future for one of these cameras being tested today. And by that, I don't mean getting the latest and greatest phone by any means. You can spend around $200 on a used iPhone 7 Plus, and that'll get you started with some basic photo and video opportunities, even with 4K and even with portrait ability, and then we can move on to more specific cameras and get better lenses. Let's quickly go over the hard facts, details, and specs between the Panasonic Lumix FZ300 and the Canon M50. The M50 has a larger sensor and higher ISO limit, which will improve low light performance. The FZ300 has a fixed lens, whereas the Canon is using the EFM mirrorless lens system. The FZ300 has optical stabilization, whereas the Canon uses digital software-based stabilization. The Canon has a higher quality electronic viewfinder. The FZ300 can do 12 frames per second continuous shooting, whereas the Canon M50 does 10 frames per second continuous shooting. The FZ300 with its fixed lens weighs 700 grams, whereas the Canon M50 body only weighs 400 grams. The FZ300 has only 49 focus points, whereas the Canon M50 has 143 focus points. The FZ300 mechanical shutter speed is 1 in 16,000, whereas the Canon M50 has a 1 in 4,000 shutter speed. The FZ300 has longer battery life at 380 shots per charge, whereas the Canon M50 will do 235 shots per charge. The FZ300 has a slightly better exposure bracket range than the Canon M50, and the FZ300 has larger flash coverage than the M50. 3 benefits the Panasonic Lumix FZ300 has that the Canon M50 doesn't would be 4K photo mode, post-focus mode, and an environmentally weather-sealed body. Features the M50 has that the FZ300 doesn't is Bluetooth and NFC connections, webcam support, and UHS card support. Now I'm going to show some stabilization tests in between the Canon M50, Panasonic Lumix FZ300, the GoPro Hero 8 Black, and the iPhone 7 Plus. The Panasonic and the iPhone are using optical image stabilization, whereas the Canon M50 and the GoPro Hero 8 Black will be using digital software-based stabilization. Some notables before I show you the footage are that I will not be using the HyperBoost 2.0 mode for the GoPro, as that would basically be cheating. I will be using super view only for GoPro. Also, the crop factor on the Canon M50's 4K mode, as well as it being only manual settings for 4K mode, are going to hinder its ability to stabilize footage. 4K 24 GoPro stabilization test. Keeping it in super view so that we don't use the advanced stabilization, which would basically be cheating for the GoPro. GoPro at 1080 resolution and 60 frames. This is on super view, which doesn't allow the advanced stabilization. Almost certainly going to be the clear winner, obviously. 4K 30 on an iPhone 7 Plus. Walking downhill with pretty heavy steps. Now let's jog. (1080p) 60 frames per second. Walking downhill, and we'll start jogging and see if the iPhone's any better or worse at this easier resolution to actually have the software stabilize. Panasonic Lumix FZ300, recording 4K 24 and keeping it on automatic settings. Although the camera just did give me a huge corrupted card freeze issue. Now 1080p 60 with the FZ300, keeping it at wide to compare to the other cameras. This has optical stabilization, a bit like the iPhone. So hopefully it does okay here. Canon M50 at 4K 24. This is not going to be good because these are my manual settings, which I can't change on the fly. So if it needs to change the shutter aperture, I'm kind of out of luck there. And it's cropping, and this crop is really gonna mess up everything. Now 1080p 60 with the M50, which is going to be markedly better because it's not going to crop. The stabilization and all the automatic settings, including focus, are going to be functioning. And let's jog with it. This is digital stabilization only with the stock lens at a wide of 15. And real quickly, we're going to do a portrait photo test. I did not spend a bunch of time trying to get the best portrait. I tried to do it as quickly as possible to show real-world examples of all four cameras, including the GoPro. First up, I'll just show the GoPro, which doesn't have a depth of field bokeh effect, but still turns out a good photo for its super view wide-angle lens. The iPhone 7 Plus was the first iPhone to have the portrait effect, and it was a little bit lacking in that iteration. Still, with some patience and trial and error, you can get quite a good photo for an old phone camera. The Panasonic Lumix FZ300 can turn out a good portrait, especially at 2.8 aperture wide open, but it can be inconsistent. I find that at the wide angle and at the telephoto, I struggle to get that background depth of field, and I try to find a sweet spot in the middle ground of its focal length that'll produce more of that bokeh effect. Obviously, the Canon M50 is going to be a standout here. Here is a portrait at 15mm wide angle, and at the other end of the stock kit lens will be a 45mm shot. And for my specific setup, I bought a Sigma 30mm 1.4 lens, and this is what that lens looks like. Also, I'm quickly going to do a focus pull test. Now, firstly, for the GoPro, there's not much we can do. I don't believe you can pull focus for a GoPro. And for the iPhone, you have a similar experience. Here I am trying to tap to focus on the iPhone, and it's simply changing the lighting. It doesn't seem to be pulling in and out of focus from background to foreground. Now with the Lumix FZ300, I had some struggles. I wanted to do a touchscreen focus pull, which I am 99% certain this camera can do, but I wasn't able to find the setting. So instead, I'm going to pull focus with its normal focus knob near the lens. As you can see, even trying to do it as fast as I can, it's slow to pull focus, and you can notice each time I'm trying to make an adjustment. This is because the Panasonic Lumix FZ300's lens does not have a focus ring or zoom ring. The zoom and focus operates much like a point and shoot camera. And then lastly, the Canon M50. This pulls focus as you would expect from a swappable lens camera. I can quickly operate the lens ring and pull focus as fast or as slow as I want. Not only is the focus pull consistent, but it's not adding any shake to my camera even when I'm on my tripod. Now I'm going to go over a variety of things that I've discovered personally with each of the cameras, but before I do, I want to mention two YouTubers who have done a lot of good work for both of these cameras that'll be linked in the description below. For the Canon M50, Potato Jet has done numerous good videos for it, and for the Panasonic Lumix FZ300, Graham Houghton has done a variety of great videos for that camera. With the smaller size of the Canon M50 and the mirrorless system, it can feel awkward for big hands, but it has very good controls and buttons. The FZ300, on the other hand, fills the hand nicely like a DSLR would, but it has very mushy and non-responsive buttons, especially the half shutter focus. The Lumix FZ300 might have a small half-inch sensor that makes it not great for low-light situations, but its daytime 4K video, which is not cropped, turns out very well. Whereas the Canon M50 4K video will crop to about a 4/3 sensor, even though it's using an APS-C. Obviously, the selling point of the Lumix FZ300 will be that fixed telephoto lens, which can go to a wide open aperture of 2.8 through the entire length of the lens. That said, despite that impressive focal range, I wouldn't say it competes as far as image clarity with all the lens options you can put on a Canon M50. Not only with the EFM lenses, but you can run an adapter on the Canon M50 and run any lens from the EF and EFS line. The FZ300 has serviceable autofocus, but it cannot compete with Canon's dual pixel autofocus. However, everyone should know that on the Canon M50, when you run in 4K mode, dual pixel autofocus is not available. One of the reasons I picked up the Panasonic Lumix FZ300 was because it had an environmentally sealed body. However, several Canon M50 users have reported abusing their camera and it holding up just as fine as many of their other cameras that are environmentally sealed, even though the Canon M50 specifies that it is not. The 1080p on both cameras is impressive, specifically with the Canon M50, depending on which lens you run, but I just wanted to mention that iPhones and GoPros for less money are running 4K at 60 frames per second or even 1080p at 240 frames per second. That is to say, neither camera should be considered for its video purposes necessarily. If you want a high quality lens and depth of field with your video, the Canon M50 is your choice. And if you want a strong telephoto lens, the Panasonic Lumix FZ300 is your choice for video with telephoto. So let's ask that same question again with the information that we've gone over. If you have $500, which camera should you get? Well, firstly, if you have an older phone or a phone that's lacking in quality as far as the camera goes, I would recommend upgrading to a minimum of an iPhone 7 Plus, which can be had for around $200. Or you can go for a newer phone such as the iPhone SE or the iPhone 11 for around $500. If you are wanting to do action shots or anything that involves stabilization but you only have $500 and can't tack on a gimbal accessory, I would go with the latest GoPro. This goes especially for vloggers who want to walk and talk with their camera, have stabilized footage, and decent audio in camera without buying any accessories such as a gimbal or an external microphone. The GoPro is still your best bet for that. If you want a camera that's a lot like a DSLR and have $500 but not a penny more so you can't spend it on lenses, I would go with the Panasonic Lumix FZ300. This also goes for if you want 4K video that you can run on automatic mode with no compromises. Also, if you find that you'll be using that 600mm optical lens, the FZ300 is going to be the only way to get it done for under $500. And lastly, if you want a sort of entry-level DSLR experience in 2021, I would recommend the Canon M50. Starting at $500 and being comparable to entry-level DSLRs, this mirrorless camera simply offers more bang for the buck, while also offering the same benefit of DSLR cameras in that you can swap the lenses. Much like DSLRs, however, the stock kit lens is rather underwhelming. So on sale for $500 before taxes, you are likely going to want to add either a zoom lens or a prime lens if you are focusing on portraits. So in getting this camera, one should plan to spend anywhere between $250 or $500 on top of the initial $500 cost. And as you may have noticed, I should mention that I use all 4 of these cameras anytime I go out and shoot. The Canon M50 is now my main camera. I have the stock kit lens and a Sigma 30mm 1.4 lens for portraits. I bring the FZ300 for anything telephoto based. I bring the GoPro for anything that needs to be stabilized or go underwater. And I use the iPhone for slow-mo footage or just as a backup shooter, as well as my cell phone. All 4 of these devices have their place in my camera bag. And technically, you could view them as all different price ranges. My iPhone 7 Plus can be had for under $250. A GoPro Hero 7, 8, or 9 Black can be had between $300 and $400. The FZ300 with its fixed lens comes ready to rock at around $500 after taxes. And the Canon M50 will be on sale for $500 before taxes, and you're probably going to want to spend anywhere from $250 to $500 to complete that kit. And that is precisely the order in which I bought these cameras. I hope this video helps you decide what you can do with $500 for photography or filming. And if you'd like to learn more about the Canon M50 or the Panasonic Lumix FZ300, click the links in the description that link to other YouTubers' videos that completely go over both cameras. Thanks for watching.